Live.
Hey guys, this is Nick Whitgren, 2009 McCutcheon grad and 2012 Miami Marlins draft pick. Welcome to This Week in Baseball Across Indiana.
Welcome back. Another episode of This Week in Baseball Across Indiana. We are live on March 6th, 2022, and we got a good one lined up. First of all, guys, what do you think of Nick Whitgren? We had a good interview with him the other day, Steve. I think it was just you on it. I can't remember if Jeff was on it. I know Mark's still living the high life down there in Arizona. But tell me something about Nick Whitgren there. What a great interview that was.
Oh, he's very well. He's thought out. What he's all about. He had a lot of good pointers for youth players, and just the way he competes and everything like that. And I'm sure when they get this thing straightened out, somebody's going to snap him up. He's a free agent right now, but he's a competitor, and he's only going to get better. I think.
Competitor and all around good guy. I tell you what, we've got a couple things lined up that we're going to use that recording for. He had some great input, as well as a lot of the people we've talked to that we're going to use for our high school baseball preview show coming up in just a couple weeks. High school coaches we're going to be talking to between now and then. We've already talked to a lot of them, but he had some great insight that he wanted to pass along to players who want to take that next step. Another part of that video, I'll just I'll tease it right now. We have a Father's Day special coming up in a few months. And Nick is a father of two very youngins, and he told a great story about a father figure he had when he was a young player in the pros, that he was living with him and his family. And he had a great discussion on that transition from a from a game to home when you have kids and wife and everything like that. It was just a great story for sure. Guys, we got a very in-depth interview with a panel of media specialists that we talked to earlier in the week, and like I say every week, it was really hard to keep this thing. I think the final recording is about 45 minutes or so, and we're going to start it here in about 15. And it was difficult to get it down to that, but there's content from that we're going to use all year, just because what a great group of guys. We have great media personalities all across the state. And one of them, I'll tell you what, one of the best is right here on our crew. And I sincerely mean that, Steve. As we go around the horn here, I want to start with you. You had a great piece you did this week on the Lux kid for Duke. And, you set through that media panel interview as well. Give me your take on the state of media coverage for baseball in Indiana. I think it's getting better, but it is a business. So give me your thoughts on it.
Oh yeah, I think it's getting better. There's more diverse ways of doing media. Here we are on a podcast and streaming, and that didn't exist a few years ago. So it's only going to get better, and people are stepping into the void that they see. I mean, that's kind of what we're doing here, getting the word out about Indiana baseball. And so I think that's only, more ways to tell stories. I heard those guys telling that. We've got podcasters, and we've got seasoned TV and radio people on that panel, and in between. And I'm doing the internet thing, but I'm an ink stained wretch, if anybody knows what that means. The newspaper guy too for a long time. So I think it's in good. I think Indiana baseball media is in good shape.
Well, and I'll tell you, let's do some more name dropping here real quick, and this is open to all of us. We had a panel of 7 on there, and a learning moment for me. That's one of the reasons why it was hard to edit that thing down to a reasonable amount for one show, because we had so many people on it. But we didn't touch the surface of the number of great media panel people across the state. I'm thinking of the guy up there near you, Steve. Also,
Paul Condry.
Paul Condry. You got
Paul
Bob Lovell.
Condry. This was his 19th straight opening day. He's 19 years of doing Bethel. Yeah, Bethel University used to be Bethel College baseball. They had their opening series at Championship Park in Kokomo. They played Mount Vernon Nazarene just because it's too cold, wet in Mishawaka. So yeah, and they beautiful place. That's like Grand Park, in a smaller version.
Well, and you've got
baseball there that he does a great job.
Condry. You think of Lovell. I think of, if we talk about media, let's think about the websites that were predecessors that were there before Max Preps. I'm talking about the guy from Homestead. Help me out with his name. The guy that runs the football and basketball blog website.
John Harrell?
John Harrell. How could I not forget that name? I've had his site bookmarked for 10 years. But he is another kind of, I would call a pioneer for covering amateur sports. Let's just drop some names here. Who are some of the others that you guys can think of? Maybe they're local to you. I'm thinking of from Terre Haute, where I grew up. There's always a bunch of them. You've got all the news people. So, it's being covered. The hard thing is to find the games, and that's not just a high school amateur thing. Even with me, I've got the ESPN Plus package, I've got the Hulu package, I've got you name it, and it's still hard to find the games. So let's talk about some of those other media people, across the state.
I'll tell you who's somebody who does a wonderful job of baseball and all the other things that he covers. And that's Gordon Engelhart, and he's at the Courier Press in Evansville. He's a storyteller, but I enjoy everything that he writes pretty much. But he's really good at baseball.
Well, guys, if you or media people, if you're watching this, reach out to us, because we want to promote you throughout the year. We want to, you're doing this as part of keeping the lights on, and we want to promote you, because that's the end game for us. We want to promote baseball, and that means promoting you, promoting the people who cover the baseball scene in Indiana. So, guys, let's start talking this week in baseball across Indiana. Let's start talking about the games, and then we're going to get right to that media thing. Let's start out with Division I. The top story there, of course, is Purdue. They are still undefeated, 4-0. I don't know how many stolen bases they had today, but I do know they finally got caught stealing. A couple games ago, they were 35-35 going into the game, and they were 2-2 after the game, so they ended up 37-39. But they're still on a pace to break that record. One of the guys we talked to in our media panel was Kyle Charters, who runs the This Week in Purdue Baseball podcast, as well as the Big Baseball podcast for all of Big Ten. And man, it was a real honor to have him on, because man, nobody knows Big Ten baseball more than him. And then, of course, we also had Chris Feeny, who runs the Talking Hoosier Baseball podcast, and they had a good week, 3-1. They're getting things back together, 4-6. Just like I told him on the show, IU started out, losing to some good teams, and at one point I think they were 0-5 or 0-4 before they started to get it in gear. But you're talking, they lost to Clemson, they lost to Arkansas, so their season's just getting going. Don't count them out of anything yet. But
they took 2 out of 3 at Missouri State this weekend, so yeah, they're heading in the right direction, I guess.
Well, and we got to talk about ISU as well. They lost to Maryland. What was the score? I think it was 12-6.
12-6.
Yep, that was a game I had on my radar for a long time, but then they beat Michigan. So they're undefeated against the Big Ten right now. ISU is. They beat Minnesota 3 times and did they play Michigan once or twice? Like
Just once.
Just once. Okay. And they
beat they played East Carolina. They beat them on Friday, and then Maryland, and then Michigan.
Well, they're starting to turn things around here. Looking at the week, this is compare this to last week, and the numbers are
lost to East Carolina, but still, that's a very good program. That team's going to play in the regional or the super regional. East Carolina will probably. So.
I don't know if you guys saw this or not, but East Carolina gave a number 23 jersey to Michigan's coach this week, and I didn't see the reason why. I don't know if he played at East Carolina or what, but I'll look that up.
Eric Backage is the coach at Michigan. I don't know what the significance of giving him a jersey was.
He must have played. I know. Well, as a coach, he wears 23, so I'm thinking he played for East Carolina. And that's why they may have got him that jersey. But it was a real neat moment I caught on Twitter. And speaking of Twitter, real quick, folks, don't forget BAI this week. That's how you make sure you get recognized on the show. BAI this week. Tag that in your posts or just tag us. Home Plate BAI is our Twitter feed. Put that on your post, and we'll make sure we cover you in the following week's show. Any other big things going on in the Division I scene, guys?
Eric Backage played at East Carolina, just so we can sleep tonight.
Who's that? Oh, okay, you did. You looked it up.
Backage of Michigan did play at East Carolina.
I'll tell you what, he's that's why we call him the Dictionary of the Diamond. Steve Craw right there. He's a computer. Any other big news in D1? I mean, I know Coach Schreiber's, he's got a young team. He's just starting out there, and he's got had to fill in with a lot of JUCO players this year. Give him another year, and he's going to have his team in there. So I think he's, don't look at that record and think that Schreiber doesn't have things going in the direction he wants it to.
Yes, Valpo U, after 8 games are 5-3, and that's the best 8-game start they've had since 1999.
Wow, that is impressive. And I'll tell you what, speaking of forever, Purdue was, when they were 9-0, their best record for 113 years, I think it was, and now at 12-0, it's the best start they've ever had in team history, in school history. So tipping my cap to them. Let's keep things
home next weekend for the first time. So
home next weekend. And I'll tell you what, I mentioned this in the video. Alexander Field, folks, is one of and this isn't me saying this, Alexander Field is one of the best college baseball fields in the country. And that's not just me saying that. I have a circle of people I chat with online all the time that are big baseball fans too, and they say the same thing. As far as college baseball stadiums, Alexander Field there in Lafayette is amazing. Jeff, did you have something there?
Well, I just want to mention Kokomo, Indiana. A couple grads at the Division I level. Jackson Smeltz went 7 innings for Purdue. He's 3-0. He only gave up 1 run on 3 hits and struck out 10 today in their win.
Nice.
And he's from a McCutcheon grad. And then Kyle Wade came in and didn't get the save for Purdue, but he pitched 2 innings, only giving up 1 hit. And then Kyle Wade's teammate at Kokomo for the Hoosiers yesterday, Jack Perkins, went 6 innings. He's 2-0. So you got a couple guys there in Division I from Kokomo, Indiana, doing quite well.
Absolutely. I tell you what, I was looking here on the tags from this week. Connor Lynn from Western. Matter of fact, our buddy Chris Beecham just tagged this. So, Chris, I know you're listening in. Thanks for the heads up there, buddy. Connor Lynn earning his first collegiate win for Cincinnati. He's a Western player playing for the Bearcats there in Cincinnati. I think that was what right there. And then I tell you what, PBR Indiana, I don't know if you guys have been following them this week. They had the big – man, there are a ton of players. If you check out PBR Indiana on Twitter, I started to put all these on the page, but then they had every single player, all the non-committed players. One of the first ones is, Alec Hirschberger, we
They
mentioned
had a
him.
big showcase this weekend, and then
They
that was
did.
probably what that was all about.
Yep, and they showcase. I'm looking at some of the numbers here on these guys, and their exit velo is nuts. I'm scrolling through my list here. You had Alec Hirschberger was listed on there. We mentioned him in this show. Super Sam brings him up, and he's going to be on our high school preview show. Great future there. I had to bring this up too because the Twin Lakes coach posted this. Former McCutcheon coach, Indiana Hall of Famer, and he threw out a stat that I had to mention while we're on D1 here, and it says the batting average across D1 NCAA baseball on all bunts to third is .533. The bunt game is still alive, kids.
I saw somebody, and I don't know who it was, came back and said the batting average on all balls hit over the fence is 1,000.
Exactly. Another
everybody's got to come back.
Another name drop here, Harrison Pittsford, an Edgewood baseball graduate. He goes yard on his first collegiate at bat for Manchester. I know we're not talking D3 yet, but your first at bat, you go yard. You got to love that. I won't play this video because we got to get moving here, but I don't know if you guys saw the video by Coach Painter of the Purdue basketball team this year. And it goes hand in hand with what a lot of us, and Chris mentions it all the time, on how rankings don't mean anything. We like to name drop on this show, but look up, if you follow Purdue baseball, or Purdue basketball, look it up, or I tagged it with BAI this week. You'll see it in the tag for the latest there. And he has a great little blurb where he talks about how rankings don't mean anything. And he's talking about on the individual level. All these players, these high school players that we name drop, every show, and even the college players, they have rankings. And at the end of the day, they don't mean anything. So look that up, and we're going to keep things moving here as we go from D1 to D2. Purdue Northwest finally played some games. I think that's the hot spot right there. That's the hot topic. Purdue finally got on the diamond, going 3-1 their first games of the year. UIndy 1-3, USI 1-2, but they're still going strong at 6-3. Any other highlights we want to talk about on D2 before we move on to D3? The D3 scene, a lot of games. Anderson finally had some games. They're, they didn't start out. They had a kind of a rough week. They were 1-0 last week. Then they went 0-3 this week. Evens them up at 4-4. Earlham, I caught a little bit of Earlham's game, one of their games, 2-1 and 5-1 overall. So Earlham's still looking strong. Go ahead, Steve.
Earlham, Christian Lanchinice, he's from Lexington, Kentucky. He had a two-homer game yesterday against Wilmington. To my count, that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We had 6 two-homer games in Indiana baseball in different levels.
Nice.
This week.
I got to throw this out, and our buddies at Talking Hoosier Baseball just threw it in the chat room. They say Purdue's played nobody yet, so let the debate begin. They just threw that out in the chat room. I don't know if that was Chris or not, but I'll tell you what, we had fun on the show with a little fun banter back and forth between Chris and with Talking IU Baseball and Kyle with the Purdue podcast. But they know each other well, and it was fun. But I hear you there, Chris, with Talking Hoosier Baseball. But 12-0 is 12-0, even if you're playing my little league team. Let's go on to NAIA, guys. Any highlights here? Indiana Wesleyan went 4-3. As I'm looking at here, IU Kokomo 3-0. They're still looking good. IU Kokomo was on a lot of people's radar this year early on, and they're showing it with a good week. IU South Bend also had a good week. IU Southeast. Go ahead, Steve.
Yeah, getting back to that two-homer thing, Peyton Smith, who's a Daleville high school grad, he had 2 homers in the doubleheader against Grace yesterday for Grossing College. Mm-hmm. And Indiana Wesleyan's Evan Salmon had a 2-home run game.
Wow.
Game 1 Wednesday when they played Clary.
Nice. Going back to a D1, speaking of homers, and help me with the name again. I keep wanting to say Fergarosi. It's the
Fugers.
The Edgewood graduate, very highly touted kid. He's got one hit at the D1 level so far, but it's a big fly. So throw that in there for you, Chris. For I know he's listening
If
in.
we're appeasing Chris, can we say that Rock Tibbetts, a new Albany grad, had 2 home runs against Miami on Tuesday?
Yeah.
Because he did. I know we can go on and on.
But we, as we noted earlier, the big flies and big bunts, they're both important. Any other highlights here on the NAIA scene as I'm looking at the stats?
Yeah, Indiana Wesleyan, going back to them, they won 3 out of 4 against Spring Arbor this weekend. And Evan Salmon for the weekend was 10 for 17 with 8 RBIs,
Nice.
4 doubles, and a home run. They also have MJ Stavola. He was 12 for 23 with 8 RBIs. Blake Starr was 10 for 13 with 7 RBIs. And Brennan Moorhead went 9 innings, gave up 5 hits, no walks, and struck out 11 in one game.
Nice.
So they're off to a good start. Not surprised at all. I haven't got anything back. I'm assuming that some of these teams might still be playing because I haven't heard back from USF, St. Francis, or Huntington, or Tech.
Yeah, some of them were playing late. They're on the road.
They're trying to get it.
One of them in Arizona, so I think they were playing late today.
What about Taylor? I tell you what, they're they're not under Mark's radar. I think everybody in Indiana knows Taylor's got a great program, but they're starting to make some noise. A good 3-1 week, and they're still holding strong at 12-7. I'll tell you what, up there around you, Mark, northeast part of the state. Well, everything, like I said, that northeast from Indiana, that you take a 45-degree angle up through Anderson all the way through Fort Wayne and everything around there. There is some good college baseball in that part of the state for sure.
Oh, the NAIA stuff is really good in this area. St. Francis is off to a great start with a good young team. It's not like they're riding old horses. They're riding young horses, and they're producing.
Well, Coach Butcher, yeah, he was another young coach that in that area. I tell you what, and just a great guy. And there's a coaching brotherhood up there in that Fort Wayne with all those coaches between Coach Butcher at USF and the Huntington coaches and Grace, and all the way up to Trine. Those guys all know each other. They help each other out. Just one of my favorite parts of the state for college baseball scene for sure. Let's go to JUCO. Ivy Tech, the scores are still kind of hard to find, but we know they had currently, I think they're still playing. Is that right, Steve? But they're 2-0 overall that we have record of.
Right. They were playing Lincoln Trail this weekend, and I know they won their first game of the weekend, and then after that, sort of trails off. So I'm not sure what happened.
And Vince Henn's had a tough week. Yeah, Vince Henn's had a tough week, but I think they're coming around. They had a good first week.
Well, they were playing like Kellogg, and they're a top 10 team, so they were playing pretty good competition.
Absolutely. Well, guys, any more thoughts on this week in baseball before we turn it over and put the mics on the media people? We're going to recap it once we're done. Hang around to the end, folks, because our final out, we're talking media. But, Steve and Jeff, you guys were on this interview. Any thoughts? I had to leave out a whole section that was really interesting because a lot of these guys had some great thoughts on the major league issue. Everybody's trying to change the Major League Baseball scene, whether it's, the pitch clock or starting at second base on extra inning. I about said overtime on extra innings, or all these different rules to speed up the game. And the one question I asked them that's not in this video, and maybe I'll get some thoughts from you guys, was, and we'll have this on future episodes, but if you take Joe Buck on one side of a continuum and you put John Boy on the other. Now, for some of you older folks, John Boy is kind of like a Harry Carey. He's there's little to no filter on John Boy. Whereas Joe Buck, he oftentimes, and I'm not saying this is my opinion, but oftentimes he will get the reputation of being boring. Now, I personally think he's very knowledgeable of the game. He's very respectful of the game. He can be a little dry, but I think he's smart, and I think the overall opinion is there's room for both. But at the end of the day, we started this show talking about how media has evolved when it comes to coverage of baseball, because the ESPNs of the world, the CBS and the NBCs of the world, the Fox Sports 1, they're not covering a lot of college baseball. It's getting better this year, but I think shows like This Week in Purdue Baseball, shows like Talking Hoosier Baseball that we mentioned, all of these shows, like our show, are filling the void, and I think they're doing a good job of it. But you guys, any perspective on, where does the entertainment side of covering baseball lie? Does it need to be just straight stats, or does it need to be this no filter, or is somewhere in between where the coverage of baseball lies? And I'll just kind of open that up to all you guys before we move on to our recording.
No filter.
No filter, says Mark.
Tell it like it is, right now with what's going on in Major League Baseball, I think it's a nice thing that you can tune into Hulu and pick up college baseball all Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. And good games, you can pick your teams. They're out there that you can scroll through. And I think it's a great opportunity for parents and players to get a chance to watch good college baseball, see what it's all about. We didn't have that years ago. This is all pretty new. My son played in 2004 to 2007, and we had to watch games on what was called live stats. And if you didn't have a strong internet, you weren't getting updated stats, and they would buffer for sometimes they buffer for 3 or 4 innings. And, that's awful when your kid's on the mound. But now, gosh, I've watched a lot of local players just in the last 2 weeks on the Hulu broadcast. So I say go get it, get out there and watch it. If you can't go watch it live, which in our area, pretty much all of Indiana is not feasible now unless you're at Grant Park. But for the next couple of weeks until it warms up, man, it's a great opportunity, especially with pro baseball, doing their thing.
Yep, and college baseball has the scene right now. They have the stage. And, I got to give a shout out to people like Flow Sports, for example. ESPN Plus is, and, the Hulu package that includes ESPN Plus, they don't cover all the games, but Flow Sports has stepped in and they've covered some. I got to, use them for when they were covering the Round Rock tournament. They were covering a lot of the stuff early in the season. They cover a lot of the tournaments. So be sure to check them out. Jeff, did you have a thought on that?
Well, I didn't have a thought. I'm having a thought on the media guys that you guys, the people are going to listen to here any minute. But I just thought all those people are not in it for the money. You could just tell in their voice that they were doing it because they loved what they were doing, and for the love of the game. They're not making any money. They came out and said it. That's what I took away from questioning them, and people will see that here and hear that out in their voices, that they weren't in it for the money. They're doing it for the love of the game.
Well, and that's a good point, and that's actually one of the questions I brought up to him, because there are, on our panel, we had, I think 2 or 3 guys that, it is part of their career is to, make an income off of this. But one thing, like Jeff said, one thing they all have in common is the love of the game. And so one of the questions I ask them here is when I get ready to hit play is, sometimes you got to roll up your sleeves and go to work, but other times you're just a fan and you get to sit back. And what are those moments in the work part of your media coverage where you get to be a fan? And that was one of the questions they had some really good answers for us. Guys, I want to shut up. I keep talking. I could keep doing this all day. Let's take a listen to our media panel interview.
I've been with the Region Sports Network since 2006 as a company. We've been around for over 20 years. And personally, I just kind of fell into this. I graduated from college in May of 06, was getting married that summer and needed a job, and had a different career path in mind, wanted to work for a sports franchise. I interned with the now defunct Indiana Ice when I was in college of the USHL, and kind of fell into this, had some connections to Chris Ramirez, the president of the company. And day one on the job, I got to produce a baseball game. And my first thought was, whoa, I could do this for a living. Like, this could be a full-time job. And I was the only one of my roommates in college, oddly enough, who didn't major in telecommunications. And now I'm the only one who does it. So it's just kind of one of those weird career paths, and, fell in love with the business that have been doing this, like I said, since 06. It's a whole lot of fun to, especially during baseball season, that's the job, is I get to leave the office and go call a baseball game. There's nothing better than that.
Well, in terms of pertaining to baseball, this is the sport that was my first love and the first one that I played. I was fortunate enough to play from the age of 5 all the way through high school. Kind of had to make a choice when I got to college as to which sport I was going to play, whether it was tennis or baseball. And when I talked to both coaches, I was going to college on an academic scholarship. So it's kind of lucky enough to be able to pick which sport I was going to play. And I thought it was going to be a lot easier to keep my academic money playing tennis instead of baseball because of the rigorous travel schedule that Gary Vaught had put together for his first season as the head coach at the University of Indianapolis. So while I am knee deep in basketball now, as of Friday, my first high school baseball game would be a month away on April the 4th. So I get a little bit of downtime after the basketball state finals. And by downtime, I mean about 6 days. And then it's high school baseball and softball season for me for the better part of the next 2 months.
I am a graduate student at Purdue University, Fort Wayne. This is I think it's my 4th year running my independent blog around the Northeast corner. Basically, I'm covering 2 conferences, the NECC and the Northeast State. Why I do it? Well, I felt like there needs to be more coverage of those 2 conferences. It's an area where it gets sometimes overlooked by the grand scheme of Fort Wayne. A lot of good talent up in the Fort Wayne area. And so, ironically, it came at the right time with the Central Noble Cougars winning the state championship in girls basketball, and just the NECC having the best moments ever in terms of the parity of the sports as a whole. I cover as many sports as I possibly can, but the main ones I usually hit are basketball, football, baseball, softball, and even volleyball is starting to get a little bit of recognition. Away from the blog itself, I have also been working some stuff for the Purdue Fort Wayne Athletics as an SID student. So away from the blogging stuff, I'm also involved into the media aspects with college athletics. And so that's always a fun experience to have there and try to get my name out there. Why I do it? I like to tell stories. I like to get my perspectives on sports and really try to get my name out there. Try to get people, try to get connections along, try to get the kids the recognition they deserve, and really just give a different, a whole nother angle, a whole nother insight of the sports in this great state of Indiana. We're just about underway with March Madness in all levels of basketball here in Indiana, and it's always a wonderful time. But I will always say baseball is a pretty darn good sport to cover here in Indiana as well. I'm come from a rich baseball family, so it's a very big deal for me to cover this great game of baseball. Hopefully we get Major League Baseball soon, because that's not going too well right now. But yeah, I just love talking about sports.
I'm from the Northeast corner, so go right after Sam. I went to Lakeland High School from LaGrange, Indiana, so probably about 30 minutes east of where Steve covers. Now I'm currently a sophomore at Indiana University. Like Dan said, I'm trying to be an agent, MLBPA certified agent. Hopefully I can get that certification in 2024, 2025. Started the podcast last March. Just to gain a lot of connections within the baseball industry. Like you said, I've had Max Clark, had quite a few other projected first round draft picks coming up these next few years. Just really want to use the podcast to help provide value for the players, help provide value for coaches, agents that I bring on, and just make connections within the baseball world.
I grew up in Massapequa on Long Island, moved to Brooklyn after that, and then came out here in 2014. And I was a big baseball fan back in New York, big Mets fan, 30, 40 games a year, playoff games, whatever. Well, when there were some, whatever I could get to. And when I got out here, I was like, I'm a basketball fan, but that's not me. Like, baseball was my thing. So I bought season tickets to the Bart. It was Schwarber and Travis's last year. It was plenty of fun. You know what I mean? Obviously, that season didn't end well. And I told people, I'm used to this from the Mets anyway. We were supposed to do great, and then it didn't happen. So I was used to it. A couple years later, just from meeting people at the ballpark, my brother had lived out here. So I was connected with some people. But honestly, the guys that I've met and that we started the podcast and the website and everything was just from meeting at the bar, meeting, just going to ball games. One day I decided to just start giving updates from my Twitter account of what was going on at Indiana baseball. And then I was just like, you know what? I'll just make an IU base account, right? So it was 2017. I just called it IU base 17. I really thought I was going to change the year every year as it went along, but I just never did. And then we had a Facebook group started, again, just for Indiana baseball, right? All the other ones were basketball and this and that, but this was just for the baseball team and just for fans of the, Indiana Hoosier baseball. And then, ideas got put together. Let's put a website together. Let's do a podcast. And it's just friends, just doing it. And we put it together. It's called Talking Hoosier Baseball. And the website's called iubase.com. And in the beginning, to be honest, it was more like a fan site, and we were just kind of writing whatever. And then we were like, you know what? People are watching this. People are reading this. We can do something with this. So we applied for media credentials. Now we get a student intern from IU every year to sit in the press box, gives them an opportunity to write game recaps. We do the weekly podcast. And iubase.com, it's Carl James, Josh Bennett, and Cass Palmer. The four of us pretty much do, the podcast, and Carl does most of the website now. My personal life has changed a bit since the beginning, so I have a lot less time. But Carl James has really grabbed onto it and made it happen. And it's taken us places I never thought we'd go. I'm on the field interviewing Mercer at LSU. We're getting pregame interviews with Jeff. We're doing post games with players. It's like, wait a second, we're sitting in the bleachers, and now we're doing this. And it's just an opportunity. And there's so many people doing this, right? And I know a lot of people, it is their profession. But for us, we're just, guys from the bleachers who put it together. And there was a need for it. There was much more of a need for it when we started it. Coverage of Indiana baseball through the university and through others has grown a bunch since then. But, we just keep rolling along and give people what they want and give them some info about the baseball team.
I've done Purdue baseball play-by-play for 18. This is my 18th year now. I came back to town. I've lived in Lafayette since 1985, although a short period I was out of town. Came back in 05 and started working for Gold and Black Illustrated. Did that for 13 years or so. At that same time, started doing Purdue play-by-play. My brother and I started doing a morning radio show on a local sports channel here in town. That was probably now, I guess, 3 years ago or so when the morning show started. Then he joined me a little bit later, and he does color for Purdue baseball, home games. And so we wanted to start up a podcast when we were doing that morning show, and we just, felt like there was a real void of Big Ten baseball coverage that, it wasn't being covered. Aside from Chris Webb, who was doing his work for 10innings.com, there really just wasn't anything else that was covering it as a whole. So we decided 4 years ago that we were going to start doing the podcast. Now, unfortunately, COVID ended our morning show, which was unfortunate, but the station has been gracious enough to let us continue to come in and do the podcast every Tuesday. So we try to have coaches on. And you mentioned we had Goff on. Last week we had Steve Owens at Rutgers on. Not sure who we'll get. We'll obviously get Rob Vaughn on here soon, the head coach of Maryland. I mean, the Terrapins have been off to a great start. So we just try to fill in the gaps and have fun with it, and talk a little bit of baseball. And it helps us with our Purdue broadcast too, because we know more about what's going on at Maryland and Rutgers and Indiana and everywhere. So, it's been fun, and we've enjoyed doing it. It is nice that the Hammer lets us still come in the studio. I think they do that because we're doing it for free rather than the old radio show they had to pay us. But we have fun with it, and we love baseball. I mean, he played in high school. I watched him play in high school, and so we've always been around the game and really enjoyed it. I was the mascot for the Lafayette Leopards for 2 years, which is sort of a random fact, but so it's just been something that we've sort of grown up with and love, and are happy to do the podcast every week.
Well, I'm listening to these guys, and they're all professionals. Me, I'm just a guy that is a former jock that was running out of a career in officiating, that getting too tired or the knees were going to leave me. So I was asked if I'd be interested in coming on and doing some radio, and I says, no, I can't do that. But I came back and I said, yeah, I'll do it. And I've been doing it for 13 years now, and it's been a blast. I guess I look at it from a different perspective. I've got to know Greg Rakestraw, who I admire so much, but these guys, you talk about professionals, all these guys are professionals. I'm just a fan that happens to have a microphone in front of me, and when I'm doing a ball game, I look at it from two ways. From an official standpoint, because I look at a game different, but a fan, and I'm not that good at it. I just have fun doing it. And that's what I enjoy about it. And being around the game for so long, and I have so much fun doing baseball games, having traveled the world playing it. And so now I get the opportunity of discussing it and breaking it down and letting everybody know how important it is for high school kids to go out there and play this great game. And there's nothing better for me to go to a ball game like at Wabash. I guess I'm a little biased, but it's the greatest place to watch a high school baseball game. And so when we have people, 2,000 people show up at a high school game at Wabash, you got something cooking. But it's a great game. I've been blessed, like I said, to be around a long time because I'm really old. And so that allows me to do that. But I think everybody here has played the game and has enjoyed the game, and this is maybe one small way we can give back to the game because it's given us all so much. And I've just been fortunate. I've been around a lot of really good teams and really good players and watched them and listened to Greg Rakestraw over the years, the past few years actually, and getting to work with him just a little bit, learning how he does it and his study patterns. And yeah, we all sitting here going to be talking to you tonight have been blessed to be around this great game of baseball. But I think we've all been blessed to be around these great kids and young adults that we're watching play this outstanding game. And oh, by the way, the coaches are pretty good too.
I want to talk about those moments where I call it the 12-year-old kid moment. It's that moment where maybe it's one person you get to interview, or it's just the fact that your job involves talking sports. What is that 12-year-old kid moment for you where you're like, you know what, I am doing exactly what I meant to be doing for my career. And, I know one of those answers from one of the people, I think anyway, so I'm going to go right to him. I'm going to go to Greg. Greg, I got a chance to, you interviewed me during the state finals this year, and that view you had from the person that I had a 12-year-old kid moment when I'm sitting up there with you. Matter of fact, I even told you the hard part about this, you interviewing me right here, is going to getting me out of this chair. So as you know, some of those views from Victory Field, when was the last time that you had a 12-year-old kid moment where you're like, yeah, I'm loving my job?
Well, first of all, you were the perfect guest. We had an hour to fill. So God bless you for helping me do that. We have a between game show. So the interview that Dan is referencing would be from, I was lucky enough to be on the 1A, 2A television call for the baseball state finals last year. And then I was the voice heard in all the counties other than Du Bois County, because they were listening to Walt Ferber and Kurt Guxel as far as Southridge and Jasper. I had the state radio network call for those games last year, and we kept it live in between both games. And so Hardy the Hat Guy not only had his 15 minutes of fame, had his 15 minutes of thank goodness you were Rain Delay Theater in between games, which I am forever appreciative of. I'll give you two. One was, and again, we all talk about how cool our jobs are. We get to go to ballparks for a living when it comes to talking about baseball. I interned with Channel 13 the summer of 1996 I was all of 2 years removed from playing high school baseball at the time. I was between my sophomore and junior year. I wasn't paid for this, but the summer that I was there was the transitional summer between Busch Stadium and Victory Field for the Indianapolis Indians. And one of my jobs on the last day of Busch Stadium for the Indians on July 3rd, 1996, was trying to protect Bob Gregory from getting drilled by live batting practice on television. Because Bob, and this is a really cool idea, they replaced the standings for what was the American Association at the time and put like the forecast temperatures or the high temperatures that day for Buffalo, Nashville, Oklahoma City. Well, he was filming this at about 5:15 or so. And this is when I think they were playing the Nashville Sounds, I believe at the time, when they were taking batting practice. And I think there was $100 bounty if somebody hit Bob Gregory with a batted ball from 325 feet away. You hit him, during a live, broadcast. So I was, doing what I could to shag flies and protect the man without actually appearing on television. Fast forward 8 days later, my job is to hit fungos to John Stair. John actually played college baseball. For those who know who John is now retired, but basically spent 20 to 25 years as the lead news anchor on WTHR in Indianapolis. John wanted to do these action baseball shots to, signify the opening day of Victory Field 8 days later, July the 11th. And so I get to hang out on the field all day before the opening game of Victory Field. That's cool. From an interview standpoint, being the Reds fan that I am, I got to do a live radio show from Great American Ballpark, and I got to hang from the booth next to the Reds, and Marty Brennaman is sitting there. I'm interviewing him, and we're just kind of talking shop and talking baseball during the breaks. And as I'm looking out in the field, I'm like, it's a pretty good gig that I have here.
Speaking of baseball coverage, I'll go to you, Nathan, up in the region, because one of the great calls from last year was a Region Sports Network game, and I believe it was the semi-state or the regionals up there, and it was a throw from left field to get the guy at the plate. And I mean, I was watching it at home and I jumped up. It was just a great call. You guys do a lot of games up there, and I know you're a fan. Tell me about those moments where you just get lost in being a fan. I'm like, oh, I forgot I got to do a show here. And, you're kind of lost in the moment.
Well, thank you for that. That was my call on that one, a regular season game between Lake Central and Munster last year. And, going back to those, moments that kind of put you in awe, similar to what you and Greg were just talking about. The first state championship I got to cover in any sport was down at Victory Field. And just the first time going up there and seeing the views and everything, just kind of, was awestruck from there. And Hanover Central was playing, representing Northwest Indiana in that one. And long story short, I was doing color and producing, and my play-by-play guy said, hey, I need you to take over play-by-play for half an inning. I had never done it before. I'd never done play-by-play in any sport. And all of a sudden I'm calling a state championship game. So that took a little bit after that. We got through the half inning for the most part, and, got to catch my breath afterwards, but was pretty intimidated by that. And that was a really cool moment that I look back on fondly. And the one that really, the assignment that really kind of took me back to that 12-year-old kid moment. A couple of years ago, Bo Jackson was doing a public appearance up here in Northwest Indiana. And as I mentioned before we jumped on air, I'm a huge Raiders fan. I'm a White Sox fan as well, living in the region. So, Bo Jackson was my favorite athlete as a kid, growing up late 80s, early 90s. He, that was my guy. I got some autographed pictures and stuff here in my basement. So to go interview Bo Jackson was, I am shocked that that interview actually took place, that I could actually speak and talk to him. It was a really cool moment. 8, 9, 10-year-old Nathan was kind of flummoxed by that whole thing. It was just, I wouldn't believe it at that age. So that was pretty cool.
That's just a dream. I tell you what, I'll never grow up, fellas. Let's keep going around the horn here, and let's go back to Bloomington, Chris. And you were talking about you started this as a fan. Now you're talking about you're on the field interviewing Coach Mercer. You're from Brooklyn. You're from the heart of baseball. So I'm sure you got stories as a kid, growing up even. But as you started doing this, as you started running the Hoosier Baseball podcast, what are some of those moments where you're like, whoa, this has got to a point where I'm absolutely loving it?
Well, for me, and mentioning LSU, that was a surreal thing. Even just going out there early, picking up the media passes, doing batting practice, getting video on the field. This is not things we thought we were going to be doing when we started iubase.com and we were making jokes about what was happening at the bar. So, but honestly, the number one moment was it had to be at the end of 2019. The team obviously knew what we were doing. They were giving us interviews. We were interviewing guys all year. In the summer, we would do a lot because we like to take it through the whole season, right? Summer ball, the high school kids, the draft, anything that involves Hoosier baseball, whether they're coming in or they're alumni. So they had some connection to us. They knew us. And Gabe Bierman was on the mound. We knew his father had passed. And he comes in the game to close out the Big Ten championship, the first one in 5 years. Bierman, takes care of it, the dog pile, the whole thing. They let us come on the field to get video, pictures of the celebration, of the whole thing. Then they call us over, the four of us, me, Josh, Carl, and Cass, and they hand us the trophy. And we take a picture on the field with the Big Ten championship trophy. So I thought, you want to talk about 12-year-old kid. It was special. And it's not like we were like, oh, where's the trophy? No. They're like, come here. I mean, that I thought was really special. We are obviously not professional media people. We're doing it because we love the program. We're doing it because we want more people to know what's going on about the program. But for them to kind of wave us over and set us up on the field with that photo was real special. And definitely a 12-year-old moment.
I'll tell you what, I'm living through you guys right now. I got to tell you a quick Mercer story before we pass it over to Purdue. Coach Mercer at the state finals this year, he was standing, I had that hat display that you see behind me the whole game. And Coach Mercer's standing up there 10 feet from me the whole game. Of course, I'm not going to bug him. But after the game was over, I said, hey, Coach Mercer, come over here. I'm like, I'll get a picture with you. I'm Hardy the Hat Guy. And he goes, oh, yeah. I'm like, whoa. Can you say that again? And I can record it so I can show my wife and make her think I'm a big deal, that you'd heard of me. So that was kind of a 12-year-old kid moment for a kid that'll never reach 13. Let's go to Lafayette. Let's bring it to Kyle Charters. And, you talk to you talk to a lot of people on a regular basis, but you're also doing some traveling. You're living my dream job right now. Tell us about the times where it's not work, it's play.
Oh man, it's an interesting question, I think, for me, because I've had a lot of really fun experiences. I mean, going back to covering Purdue football and Purdue women's basketball. I mean, heck, when I was a student working at the Exponent, I flew out to San Jose in 1999 and covered Purdue's national championship, and then was there a couple of years later when the women's team lost to Notre Dame in St. Louis. I mean, it goes back a long time. And if there's a Purdue athlete over the last 20 years of any relevance and a lot of no relevance, I've probably talked to them in one form or the other. But, as for baseball, I played Little League baseball, didn't play in high school. This affords me an opportunity to feel like I'm part of the team. I didn't travel. I'm not in North Carolina. I'm at home. I have two 19-month-old twins, and Purdue spent 10 straight days in Carolina. So we've got a freelancer doing these games. I'll be back with them when they get back next week again. I just couldn't afford to be gone for 10 days. But I think it's fun just being part of the team, just hanging out, telling stories, getting to know the guys over 4 or 5 years. It's a little bit different now than it was 18 years ago because, I wasn't that much older than them back then. So we hung out away from the baseball field. It's not quite the same now, but, I'm the longest tenured guy on the bus by a few years, which is just hard to believe. So I think it's the moments like that and just sort of, being there at breakfast and asking, Doug Schreiber or Mark Wazakowski or Greg Goff now, why he decided to send the runner, or, what happened with the other team in the rundown you got him trapped in, or, what'd you think about that call from the umpire? I think it's just stuff like that, and being part of that and seeing those runs, I think that is why I get drawn back to it every year.
I'll tell you what, Purdue fans, if you're watching this, when they get home and have that first home game, we have got to fill up Alexander Field. That place is just one of the best college baseball fields in the country. Another good one on IU too, by the way. You know, I'm not going to stir it up.
1900 on a midweek.
I tell you,
1900 for opening day.
Big Ten baseball, folks. Big Ten baseball is good. You know, IU started out rough, but okay, I'm going to go off on a tangent here. I could talk about that all day. Let's go to Wabash. Bob, I can, you know, you probably got a lot of stories too, because I can just tell and listening to your show. And when I got to talk to you, you are a 12-year-old kid, and you know, doing the, and I say that as a 12-year-old kid myself, with all the respect in the world, meaning your fanhood of youth amateur sports, your commitment to it shows. So when was one of those times where you're just saying, wow, you know, I got into this radio thing, maybe it wasn't what I thought I was going to do, and I'm glad I did?
Well, you know, I wish I was 12 again, just to let you know. But, you know, following, we're rather unique because we cover 7 high schools. So we get the luxury, if somebody gets on a roll, we're going to go with them. And we followed Northfield to state finals a couple different times. They won one, they lost a few. We've and with different coaches. I think that's what I like watching high school sports. I call it the pure sport out there because kids aren't paid to play. Kids have to go to class. They have to get the grades, and they have to intermingle with their classmates every day, and yet still play the game. And by going to watch Northfield with Coach Tony Ugan win the title, then they drop one a couple years later. Then along comes Clint Davis that took him to a semi-state. That was a great run. Coach Baker did a great job. But then you got Chuck Brimberry over at Peru, that if you've ever done a Peru Tiger baseball game, literally the best part of the game for me was post-game. Because you get him up there and he starts talking. He has great liners, but he's always teaching the game. So different coaches, when I'm doing ball games, I really enjoy the post game. The games are great, but to be able to ask the questions who, what, when, and where, and why, the answers they help us out with, because the way we try to describe it over the radio is for our listeners who aren't there, but we try to keep it very basic. And so when we say a certain situation, what would you do? And then we get the coach up there to tell us why he did it. And it's always interesting to me and the great kids playing the game, to watch them and watching their faces when they're down in Indianapolis at Victory Field, or up in South Bend playing, or in Fort Wayne. We're very fortunate that with Parkview Hospitals here, they allow us to go up there and do high school games. They play a lot of high school games at Parkview Field, and broadcasting up there is a blast also. But just doing those runs and watching the community get involved with those runs, and then actually doing the game, that to me is what my job is all about, having fun with the kids, because we all know we get intermingle with those kids, and what a bunch of knuckleheads they are.
I'll tell you what, you got a lot of good coaches up there in that area, and I love Coach Brimberry. I know him. Me and him go way back, and you're right. He is a character, and I know he's a fun interview for sure. He's got lines. Guys, we're in extra innings here. Let's go to Sam. And Sam, you know, you're starting it out. You had to do this for a reason. And I love just the fact that your commitment and your dedication to it. That's from me as a fan myself, looking from the outside in. Let's give us a look from the inside out. What turns the clock for Sam Frick and coverage of the Northeast Corner Conference up there in beautiful Northeast Indiana?
Well, that's a good question. I think one of the things that really keeps me motivated is just the understanding of, hey, you're doing this for fun. You know, you find ways. You're always looking for ideas, looking for different ways to do it, to keep the fans interested, to keep me interested, keep everyone interested. Because you know what? It's not about me. It's about bringing perspective and bringing awareness to the kids up in Northeast Indiana. You know, we in the 260 region are very blessed to have a lot of talented kids, not only playing baseball but also playing multiple sports. You know. those kids only get so many chances to get to get these kind of moments. I love stats, and I think they're important to talk about, but to me, it's all the other stuff that they do. It's the effort, it's the intangibles that they bring every day that makes student athletes stand out. And that's what I love about the rural communities here in Northeast Indiana. It's blue collar communities. It's people that just love the hard work and love the dedication. And that's what I enjoy. And that's why I love baseball so much, because it exemplifies that blue collar small town spirits.
I'll tell you what, man, that's a seasoned pro saying that right there. You know, I Bob and Kyle and Greg, I don't think anybody could have said it any better. I mean, we're going to be looking to you this year, Sam, for baseball across Indiana to help us get an eye on that northeast corner up there, that east side. Coach Willard, interesting fact about, he's taking a softball team and a baseball team to the state finals, and his son's a senior, and they may not have known him midway through last year. They're going to know him this year for sure. Let's go to Jayce, another IU guy, also from the corner. A lot of tie-ins in this show. And I'll tell you what, I absolutely love your podcast. I legitimately, you've got great people on there. You're bring it down to earth. Interviewing with them, it's just a conversation, and I absolutely love your style. And man, I'll tell you what, you talked at the beginning about making connections. You are making connections. So tell us about, from that perspective of somebody just starting out in this. And if you're going to be an agent, buddy, you are going to keep making connections. This is a guy, I'm going to promote you right now as much as I can. So when you're making millions, you can come back and say, hey, that Hardy the Hat guy helped me get started back in the day. Let's, so I'm buttering you up right now. I'm kidding. I legitimately love your show. Tell us about those moments that keep you wanting to keep moving with it.
Yeah, of course. But before I do that, I do want to speak on behalf of just an athlete who's been covered by Super Sam. I remember growing up, I'm young enough to where I think maybe my sophomore, junior, senior year, we were covered by Sam. And it was always just great to see those articles come out on Facebook, Twitter. That was always the talk of the team. Like, oh, did you guys see that article last night? Did you guys see his predictions for the tournament? All that type of stuff. So I know Lakeland, my teams, we've always been super appreciative of Sam, everything that he's done. But just in terms of some of the key moments I've had on the podcast, when I was reading over the email this morning, there was 2 or 3 that came to mind. I would say probably the first one was last season. I interviewed Ryan Pepio, Butler alum, in AAA for the Dodgers right now. Interviewed him. He was one of my first guests. And the day that the interview came out, I got a text from him. Hey, my agent wants to talk to you. And I was sitting down. I think I was watching MLB Network. It was March, so spring training was going on. And luckily my roommates weren't around, because once I got that text, I was like pumping my fist. I screenshotted it. I sent it to my dad. I was so pumped. I ended up talking to him at the time. His agent was Raza Malik in True Gravity Baseball. I've talked to Raza. I got Raza on the show. Raza's a great guy. I love their company. Since then, Pepio, he's moved on to a different agency. He's now with Scott Boras. So obviously he's with the best of the best now. Another key moment just throughout the podcast, I haven't really got to experience a whole lot yet. This summer I'll be able to quite a bit. It's just to watch some of the players on the field after I've interviewed them. Last season, I got to watch Bryce Wyndham. He's in the Cubs system. Got to watch him. He had a couple walks that game, nothing special. But this summer, I'm definitely going to be able to go watch Max Clark, Matt Santana up there at Lake Central. Going to be watching the Indiana Bulls. I'm really pumped to go watch some of those guys play. And then I'd probably say my third little kid moment with the podcast would be whenever I release an episode, and I'll get some of those whoever the guest was, I'll get some of their friends to follow the podcast. Because then that allows me to kind of direct message them through social media and be like, hey, I'd love to get you on the podcast. And it just allows me more ways to connect and more ways to build their brands and build my brand as well.
Well, of everybody on the show, you're probably the only person cool enough to be on TikTok. You talk about social media and everything like that. I told the guys at the beginning of the year, I'm like, you know what, we'll go Twitter, we'll go Facebook, but I'm just too old for TikTok. I'm not cool enough. They may kick me off. But let's talk about your 2022. We talked about what's exciting in baseball for you. We talked about the past. let's put them both together. What is exciting you're excited about specifically for 2022? And maybe, Nathan, I mentioned the region up there quite a few times. What are you excited about with the Region Sports Network?
Looking forward to 2022 and starting to put our broadcast schedule together. And one of the things I love about region baseball and softball, as well as some of the conference rivalries we have up here, especially looking, the Duneland Athletic Conference, and everybody, all these schools are so close knit and close to each other that they're genuine rivalries. You look at, Lake Central and Crown Point, two large size schools up here, and whenever they face off in any sport, it's a big deal. And especially, in the baseball season, you get those back-to-back Tuesday, Wednesday DAC games are really exciting. And so, looking forward to picking out some of those conference matchups to go do some live video streams on. In the Northwest Crossroads Conference, Munster's going to be a team to follow. Longtime coach Bob Schinken, have to mention that just passed away last week, and Bob did an amazing job with that Munster program in the 30+ years he was there. So new leadership, obviously, over at Munster. That's going to be a team to keep track of. Andran, always a powerhouse up here. You got Drake Bowen, who's going to go play 2 sports at Notre Dame, football and baseball, and had a chance to watch some off-season hitting competitions with him. And boy, when he gets a hold of the ball, he can really let it fly. It's going to be fun to watch. So that's kind of our big thing up here, is the rivalries between a lot of these schools here in Northwest Indiana, make baseball and softball season really exciting.
I'll tell you, and you know this, I've told you, anybody that's followed me at all knows that the region is one of my favorite areas, just sports in general, because those aren't new rivalries. That's not Fishers versus Hamilton Southeastern, and I love that rivalry, by the way. Don't get me wrong. It's one of the best in the state, but these rivalries go deep. That is generational rivalries up there, and it's proud communities, and I absolutely love it, and nobody covers it better than you do up there. So I'm looking forward to tuning in this year. Let's keep going around the horn. Jayce, let's go to you. Tell us about what you got going forward for the JKR podcast.
Yeah. So for season 2, I went exclusive baseball, as I've talked about before this. But at this moment, I'm trying to learn how to do some camera work. The plan here in the summer ball 2022, I'm going to be going down to the WWBA down in Atlanta with the Indiana Bulls class of 2023. Doing some roundtable interviews. So instead of just some one-on-one work, it's going to be 4 or 5 dudes that I'm just going to be sitting down, having a nice convo with. I've got Max Clark, Matt Santana. I've got them already committed to it. I'm trying to get them to convince their boys Drake Bowen and Andrew Wiggins too. That'd be a pretty good group to have. I've got the Indiana Bulls 2024, RJ Cromartie. I'm having him kind of come up with some guys for the Indiana Bulls for that class. For a roundtable interview. And then this fall, I'm actually going to be working with the Summit City Sluggers. So I know you got Mark, you're connected with him pretty well.
Yep.
I'm going to be doing some live AB content with hopefully Braden Reisdorf. I'm pretty well connected with Braden. Bringing in Matt Santana, Braden Thomas from Bishop Dwinger up there in Fort Wayne, Brandon Logan, Landon Fry. Just a lot of these top baseball prospects in Indiana. I want to show off, do some like live AB content, kind of how you see Trevor Bauer doing. So I'm just trying to provide that content and provide that value for those younger players coming up.
I'll tell you what, in this panel right here, man, we could drop some names. You guys are just name droppers. Every week, Steve has to correct me when I say the wrong name, or I'm just sitting here scratching my head because I know every stat about him, but I forget his name. And you guys are just dropping names left and right. And I'm looking forward to having you guys on throughout the year too. And let's go over to you, Sam. I'm just going to keep going around the horn. Let's bring it back to you. And we talked about that east side. It's going to be exciting covering them, but they're not the only game in town up there. And I know you're going to be covering as good as anybody.
That is correct. Typically the NECC, there's some pretty decent teams in that conference. Traditionally in the past, Westview's been pretty good, although last year they were relatively a lot younger than usual. So I do expect a few sophomores and juniors that could be pretty interesting. I haven't looked too much in depth yet in terms of the spring for baseball, but I would expect Westview to be better this year. Fairfield has been kind of sneaky in the past in terms of baseball. They've had some low-key good pitching over in Fairfield.
They got a good one coming up this year, though, yeah.
Yeah, I think they have a pitcher by the name of I'm forgetting his first name, but his last name is Hirschberger.
Yep.
He is a strikeout machine. He's probably the next thing to Owen Willard. And so whenever these two teams meet again, it's going to be a lights out pitching duel. I think the first two meetings, I think they've been like no hitters, I believe. I think in the NECC tournament, they both completed a no hitter. Like Eastside won the game by like 1-0 because
both
of an
pitchers
error.
threw a no hitter. That's right.
Yeah. And so it's going to be like the next great thing when these two teams meet again, because we also have the NECC tournament as well. So that's going to always be interesting there. Now, in terms of Northeast 8, we do have a couple of really good teams in that conference. Norwell is a perennial good baseball team as well. They're going to be pretty darn good this year. They got a lot of nice athletes. That 2023 class is just absolutely loaded all across the board from Norwell. Football just won a sectional. Girls basketball has been good as always. Boys basketball is very good. Baseball is going to be just as good. So expect Norwell to be a big contender in the Class 3A realm. And East Noble is going to be overlooked because of how good that sectional is with the Carrolls, the Snyders, the Northrops, the usual teams there. But East Noble's got a pretty good baseball team. The Rearsdorf kid, the IU commits.
Yep.
He's amazing. Like, he is an incredible athlete. And I mean, it's brought the town Kendallville a lot of juice for the 2022 season. The Northeast actually has really good baseball, probably even better than the NECC, but it gets overlooked a little bit. But the Northeast State, it's going to be a pretty good conference overall for baseball. It might even go down the wire. So expect a lot of crazy things in that conference. I think we're going to see a lot of good baseball teams coming up in the spring that I can't even tell you right now, because I think it's going to be a nice year of spring. And I think, especially with things going on with Major League Baseball, I think it's going to bring a nice breath of fresh air to the area and for the entire state of Indiana as a whole.
Well, that area is going to raise some eyes this year. I mean, you've got 4 D1ers right there in the NECC. You know, you mentioned 3 guys that, you know, they haven't played a game yet. I don't want to jinx anybody, you know, but that's, you know, between Reisdorf, Willard, and Hirschberger, you're talking about 3, you know, potential all-staters there, and Hirschberger's only a junior. Let's go down to Bloomington and Chris. You know, IU, I don't even want to say they started slow because they were playing some teams. Their strength of schedule is strong. So they're not out of anything yet. But when they come home, tell us about going forward. What are you excited about in the coverage of the Hoosiers this year?
Well, absolutely. You know, Coach Mercer's schedule is hard. And the Clemson team looks to be a lot better than we thought, even when we were at the games. You know, they're still undefeated. So, and obviously the people at the tournament were Round Rock were very good competition. So really the non-con, I don't think it's really as disheartening as some people who might not actually understand what went down, you know, are informed about. But we're absolutely motivated for this year. Just being there Tuesday, seeing fans in the ballpark. Like I said, 1,900 on a Tuesday night. You know, I don't know if you know Bloomington that well, but it could snow in March. So you're not getting 1,900 then. It was a beautiful day. And then last year, you know, we were able to cover the games as media, but we sat at a media table. And to be honest, I didn't like it. You know, I don't sit in press boxes when I go to these games. I go to the game. And so to sit there, I mean, I was at a no-hitter. I was at like 2 walk-off home runs, but it's just not the same when you can't cheer. You know what I mean? So I look forward to being a fan again. I know you had asked in the question, like, what are you going to look different for 22? To be honest, we're going to pretty much do the same thing we always do. We keep Hoosier baseball alive all year round. We follow the summer leagues. We see what the guys are doing in the minor leagues, and if the major league starts up again, whether they're alumni or they're incoming. You guys were mentioning some recruits that are coming with Wiggins and Reinsdorf, and we're just going to keep an eye on them too. Between Carl and Cass and Josh and myself, you know, this is it's a hobby, right? It's a fun. It's something that we really like to do. And sure, we've had some help from others, you know, equipment and things like that, but this is not a moneymaker. This is for, what did we say? For love of the game, right? We said last night when we were talking, and I really think it would continue to be the same in 22. But luckily there'll be fans in the stands, and we can see kids having a catch at the game, and it's just so much better. We only went to one, right? There's only been one Tuesday night, and it was just so much better.
I'll tell you what, you know, I know you were born in Brooklyn, but you're a Hoosier now, brother. And we're happy that you brought that baseball, that love of the game from the Northeast up there over to Indiana. That's exactly you're breathing my air right now. I'll tell you what. Let's go to from IU back to Purdue, and Purdue's just one thing on your hit list. You're covering it all. Tell us what you're excited about for this season, because the Big Ten race is going to be nuts.
Yeah, I think it's going to be really good. Yeah, you mentioned Purdue. That I don't know how many they had Wednesday.
Two
Wednesday. Yeah,
I think they're 37 for 39.
30,
They finally
37,
broke the streak.
game. The school record is 106. I think that might be threatened this year. But Purdue's going to play a home game, we think, on March 11th. That will be the earliest Purdue has tried to play a home game ever. So we'll see. The forecast looks like it might be in the 40s. So, back before the real field days, we played games up in East Lansing where the temperature, it was 22 and snowing. You want to talk about how improved the Big Ten is in baseball. It's just light years ahead of where it was in 2005 when I started with Purdue. Michigan State didn't have a press box. Purdue barely had a press box. It's just so many improvements. But I think this will be another good year for Big Ten baseball. I think it just improves a little bit each season, and I think that people were underplaying a little bit this year and how good the Big Ten could be. I would expect that Indiana and Nebraska, who have played two really difficult schedules at the beginning of this year, will recover and play well once the Big Ten. Will Purdue keep it up at 9-0? Purdue's going to start to play some better teams, and we'll see whether the Boilermakers are able to do that. But it's fun. I like being able to catch up with the coaches. We've always, it's been the nice thing that I had a lot of connections when I started doing the podcast. So the SIDs around, the league have been very welcoming of us. And so I sat down on Sunday and try and figure out which coach I want to talk to on Monday or early Tuesday morning. And man, I'll tell you, about 100% of the time, we're able to get that coach on for that week. And we're so appreciative of those guys being able to help us, line those things up, because it's sort of a short window between the end of your series on Sunday night and potentially traveling back from somewhere and us being able to get you on the podcast. So it's really nice that we get that kind of cooperation. But, Drew and I just try to have fun on the podcast. We're brothers and friends, and it creates pretty good chemistry between us hassling each other about crap and about baseball. But yeah, we just like to have a good time with it, and looking forward to the rest of the year.
Guys, what do you think? I tell you a couple of fun things that stood out for me. Number one, these guys, they got a lot of passion in what they do. They're not driving Bentleys to work, but they're good at what they do, and you can tell. Like what I told Bob Stambazzi is, you can tell he I think it's funny that he said he's no good at it, but because I love the way he does it. It's just a conversation, and it's like we say here all the time. It's just guys hanging out at the barbershop talking baseball, and that's what I love the way he does it. Kind of a funny thing, and this was my editing mistake, is when I told Sam that nobody covers that northeast corner better than he does, and his reply was, "Yeah, I know," but he was actually responding to some of the players I was mentioning. But I'm right; he's right, and I'm right. He did, he covers that part of the state really well, and for such a young kid, like I think it was Jeff or Steve, one of you said it before we did this, that we had a diverse set of experience. The young kids, like I call them kids, because I'm old, but between Jayce Reigling with the JKR podcast and Sam Frick with the Around the Northeast Corner, all the way to these seasoned veterans and guys that have been doing baseball at one level or another, like Chris Feeny. He's just getting into this side of things, but the guy knows baseball inside now. He's been doing it forever. He's a Brooklyn guy. So any other parting thoughts on that before we turn things over to our media pro, Steve Craw, for the final out?
What I enjoy about what I do is that, and the way I think is what I do is that I give people the opportunity to talk to the coach, talk to the player, find out what they have to say, and then share that with them. And that's what I was hearing. Bob Stambazzi's favorite part of the game was the post game where he got to hang out with Chuck Brimberry and have a conversation. And these other guys are, we get to talk to Jeff Mercer, the player of the game, or Kyle was saying he's talked to every athlete on the Purdue campus probably in the time he's been doing this. That's what you get to do. Not everybody is afforded that opportunity, but you do it, and then you pass on what you find out.
Well, and I've always said, go ahead, Mark.
The passion that those guys displayed just in their voice was nice to hear, refreshing.
That's a good point. And Jeff brought this up after that recording. He said, you can tell these guys like what they're doing, and that makes for a better show. If you're just throwing stats out, and that's it, then no one's going to watch that show. They can look it up online. But, when someone's passionate about it, like these guys are, you can tell in their show and it comes out. I want to, we do this as an escape, us anyway, we're not doing this to talk politics. We're not doing this to read the dictionary. We're doing it because we like to do it. It's an escape from, everything else we deal with, and from a fan perspective anyway. And that comes out that these guys who are doing it professionally, many of them, it comes out that they love what they're doing too. And that's more entertaining to watch. So if no other thoughts for March 6th, 2022, I will pass things over to our resident pro, Steve Craw, for today's final out.
It's March 6, 2022, and this is Baseball in Indiana's final out. Well, we didn't get to hear pitchers and catchers report to spring training. Maybe we will soon. Baseball is at a standstill, Major League Baseball. The lockout continues. There's a bad taste in the mouths of many. But I say don't give up on baseball. It's still a beautiful game. And it's much more than the guys that make the big bucks. Their college baseball has already been clicking for weeks. High school baseball begins official practice March 14th. And the first contests are March 28th. And then there will be 7 weeks of sprint after the spring break. State finals are at Victory Field in June. And who will be the next Hayden France? Who's Hayden France? Hayden France was that junior hitting in the 8th hole for Northview back in 2016. Hit the game winner. They won 2-1. He said, I got to ask him, have you had a bigger hit in your life? He says, never. Love those stories. There's Little League, Travel Ball, American Legion, College Summer League, the minor leagues. Those teams are not locked out, and on and on. And as a media guy, I keep telling those stories and looking for those stories. And we saw on BII this week that there's other guys chasing those stories too. So again, don't give up on baseball. It's still a beautiful game. Good evening.
Preach it. That's today's final out, folks. We'll see you next week.